Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for joining me again today. I am overwhelmed with how much support I've gotten on my first video. All of the comments, all of the likes. I truly appreciate it so much. And I'm really excited to be back with you guys this morning to talk about some new books and just go over some things I mentioned in my last video. So, to open up this video, I want to talk about today some emotional growth books. Books that you read that just made you look at situations differently or made you grow as a person. And both of the books that I've talked about, or that I've selected to talk about today, do take place during World War II. And so they're already, full of tragedy and war and distraught, but they're excellent reads. They will break your heart, but they're worth the read. So the first book, and I do have notes today, you guys, if you see me look down at them, just because there's a lot of names and dates and details for this video, and I don't want to mix any names up and tell you one character's in one book when it's in another. But the first book that I want to talk about that I read, this one I probably read just a year ago. It's one of the more recent books on my favorites list that I've read. And it was advised to me by a friend to read, and that is The Nightingale by Kristin and Hanah. And it was on my Kindle for a while, and I kind of would just, go buy it, because I knew just from the summary it was going to be a dense, emotional book. But I eventually opened it up about a year ago, and I'm so grateful that I did, because I cried a lot reading this book, but it was 100% worth it, and I don't ever regret reading it. So, in The Nightingale, it centers around two sisters in France during World War II. The two sisters, and if I say any of these names incorrectly, I apologize, are Vienne and Isabelle. Vienne is the older sister, and Vienne has a family. Vienne is married. Vienne has, I believe, two small children. Two small children, I'm 90% sure. And Isabelle is the younger sister, and she has no children. She's not married when German occupation comes. And Vienne's husband goes off to war. And it goes through the struggles of these two sisters in very different stories that constantly flow and overlap together. I find myself, when reading this book, very much comparing myself more to Vienne than Isabelle, because Vienne is the family. She is just trying to make it through this war. She's trying to support her family, trying to take care of her children. And so I find myself more comparable to her than the wild and more free Isabelle, who maybe takes bigger chances, which when you read the book, you'll know what I mean. This book ripped my heart out. The ending is devastating. But it's a devastating that is powerful and meaningful, and you need to read it. You need it to be there in front of you where you can't just change the channel, because these things happened and we have to face them so that they don't happen again. On the same note, the second book that I want to recommend and talk about is Jodi Picoult's The Storyteller. Now, this book was recommended to me probably closer to 4 or 5 years ago by my aunt, when I had asked for book recommendations in a group, and she had told me, if you haven't read The Storyteller, you need to read The Storyteller. This is also based a little bit in World War II. The story mostly is in World War II, but it's present day as well, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So it takes place with a girl named Sage, who is in her mid-20s, and she is going to a grief counseling group. She's very antisocial, very introverted. She works nights prepping breads at a bakery because she doesn't like dealing with people. She's had some tragedy in her life, and she's not a people fan. So she's at this grief group. There she meets Joseph, who's in his 90s. Gentleman, obviously German accent, she notices. And they become friends. And Joseph makes a request of her. Joseph asks her to help him die, essentially to kill him. There's a sordid tale that comes out that ties many, many people together. Joseph claims that he was a Nazi concentration camp guard at the very concentration camp that Sage's grandmother Minka was held. And essentially it's Minka telling this story and Sage listening, trying to piece together, to collaborate Joseph's story to see if he's telling her the truth or if he's just telling her these things so that she'll kill him. It's extremely, extremely mind-opening, I would call The Storyteller, because it humanizes this character of Joseph a bit. He was a Nazi war camp guard, and the way he tells his story and the positions that he was put in, it opens your mind just a little bit to humanize another human being. So I highly recommend The Storyteller by Jodi Picoult if you have not read it. Let's talk about what I told you guys I was reading. So I told you in our last video that I was reading The Savior by J.R. Ward. I finished that one. Really good redemption story. Underdog. The thing with the Black Dagger Brotherhood with J.R. Ward is you want to start at book 1. Dark Lover, I believe, is the name of book 1. Highly, highly recommend the series, but The Savior, which is, I believe, book 17 or 18, was hands down excellent. If you have read the series and were maybe not picking up the newest ones for whatever reason, go back and get the new ones. They're just as good as they were from the beginning, if you ask me. I read and completed in 24 hours Turn of the Key by Ruth Ware. This one is the reason for this whole video. It was an incredible, incredible book. I read it in one day. But one thing I cannot stand, and I love Ruth Ware, I love her books, I love her thrillers, and this one is a paranormal. It's dealing with ghosties and things, and unfortunately small children, which I will tell you, I don't like scary things that deal with kids. Like, I like scary, but when it starts dealing with small children, it bothers me a little bit. So I was thoroughly creeped out with this book. Thoroughly. And it's been a long time since I was really, got the goosebumps from a book. So if you like that kind of thing, Ruth Ware, Turn of the Key. But, I say but, because it was an amazing book for, I don't know how many, 40 chapters. But she lost me on the last chapter. The last one. I've put so much time into this book, and for the last chapter, I'm not going to tell you the ending, obviously, because I want you to go out and read the book. But just be prepared. You don't get a whole lot of answers at the end. And I can't stand when books do that. I don't want you to let me figure out what I think might have happened. Please, tell me what happens to these characters I've invested my time into. But I digress. Ruth Ware, Turn of the Key. Very, very, very good book. Please read it, especially if you're a Ruth Ware fan. If you've read other books of hers, I know a couple of my friends on here have. Give it a read. But keep an open mind, and let me warn you, don't expect a whole lot of resolutions out of this one. So what am I reading right now? I have started Overlord. I know. It was a recommendation by my fiance. It's a little bit hyper fantasy, more than I would normally read. But I am excited because I like reading things that are outside of my comfort zone and outside of my box. And then I told you that I'm also The Siren by Kiera Cass is next up after I finish Overlord. So I'm excited to talk to you guys about the newest Kiera Cass, Siren, when I get that one done. And I'll be talking to you about my thoughts on Overlord as well. If you're not familiar with what Overlord is, I know there's a Japanese anime now. essentially it is a book that takes place, from what I've gathered in just the first few chapters, in the year like 2300, and there is a hyper MMORPG game that everybody's playing, and it's built around a guild in this game, and that's what I've got so far. So we're going to touch base on that one when I get it finished, and I'll give you an honest opinion. It is, like I said, a little bit more high-based fantasy than what I would normally read, but I love when people challenge me, and when my fiance said read Overlord, I knew it was going to be a challenge, because it's not my genre. I like historical fiction. That's my home. That's my happy place. That's where I go for comfort. Historical fiction, maybe some romance. That's my area of expertise. So I'm excited to read Overlord, because I'm excited to expand my genres in my mind. And with that, you guys, I'm so excited to see you again today. I look forward to seeing you guys again, hopefully this weekend. On that note, what are you guys reading?